This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Today we are going to be talking about law enforcement, public disorder, and even some chemical agents. For that, got a real interesting guest here. It's Robert Sorensen. Robert is a retired special investigator with the U.S. Department of Justice Criminal Division. He also served as an FBI task force officer. He is the Corrections Section Chair for the National Tactical Officers Association, where he developed less lethal tactical protocols used by law enforcement agencies to manage public order. Robert is an expert in public order policing tactics and strategies, including the processes, methodologies, and tactics used to manage lawful protests, criminal incidents, and riotous behavior. He is currently the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Agency Liaison at SoRite, which we'll actually get into talking a little bit at the end about, because I have another guest coming in from there. So welcome to you, Robert.
Thank you. It's great to be here and great to be able to speak with you and your audience.
Hey, I appreciate having you on. I ask this sometimes when I get Americans on. Is this the first Canadian podcast you've done?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah, first
awesome.
Canadian podcast I've done.
I'm glad to be the first one. So, you know what? Let's start just by talking a little bit about yourself. Obviously, the bigger picture that we're going to get into is public disorder, which is especially a hot topic nowadays. But let's talk a little bit about you and how you got into kind of this space of things.
Oh, absolutely. So I guess I'll start at the beginning. When I graduated high school, my career goal was to be a biology teacher. And I said this before. And I did 1 year at University, Stroudsburg University in Pennsylvania. And just like everybody else kind of growing up, my mom and dad didn't have a ton of money. And so I did 1 year of college and I needed to find a way to be able to pay for that without taking out tons of student loans. So I decided to join U.S. Army Reserves. I joined the Army Reserves and my wonderful recruiter convinced me to become a military policeman.
Okay.
So I went, yeah. That's how my law enforcement, I went from biology teacher to kind of a law enforcement background is from my recruiter. And so I went to Fort McClellan, Alabama in 1996, and I graduated from the MP school in 1997, March of 1997. And so that kind of started me down that career path of, hey, this is kind of interesting. I like the law enforcement side of stuff. And one of the individuals that I was in my unit with at the 28th MP company out in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, said, hey, why don't you put in for the Federal Bureau of Prisons? They were hiring. It was a federal job. And that would be a good kind of bridge, if you will, to maybe some other career paths. So I put in my application for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and I got hired in 1997. I guess it was October of 1997. And I started out at a maximum security penitentiary right in the middle of Pennsylvania called USP Allenwood. And so I was a correctional officer for numerous years. I was promoted to a lieutenant, and I moved to Lake Placid, New York, and went up there as a lieutenant, a junior lieutenant. And then that was in 2005. 2007, I made another promotion back to Pennsylvania to another maximum security penitentiary called USP Canaan. So I worked at USP Canaan as a lieutenant until 2012. In 2012, I was promoted to an emergency preparedness officer. Now, our emergency preparedness officers are in charge of training and responsible for our SWAT teams, our negotiators. So the emergency preparedness officers kind of run all those different teams and all those different trainings and those things. Yeah. I was also the assistant team leader for our regional SORT team for the Northeast region. And if something arose in the United States, we would be called out, kind of help quell those situations. So it was a 25-man team at the time. So that was from 2012. I had 2 riots inside the USP Canaan that I was the lieutenant for, that I dealt with that. and also had an officer homicide that we had to deal with, an officer killed in the line of duty at USB Cannon. So that place was
Really?
definitely a learning experience for me. I learned a lot. I learned I didn't know what I didn't know. And I learned that I needed to understand that ego, and you can't make decisions based on emotions. So there was a lot of learning kind of going on for me in those early days of thinking I ruled the world as a lieutenant. I was in charge of everything, to having those different experiences and kind of tempering me, if you will, to be a better leader, be a better instructor.
To be the humility aspect. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think being humble and not having an ego is so vital for being a good leader, and being, and leadership goes with being an instructor. I think if you are an instructor of different things out there, if your ego gets in the way, it really causes problems for you. So I hopefully have tempered that, or as I've gotten older, and I think I'm a pretty good instructor. So I kind of scratched that, the ability to become a teacher.
Yeah.
It just wasn't in biology. It just became more of a less lethal. In 2012, I also, as an emergency preparedness officer, I was looking for ways to bring training into and cheap to my officers. And one of the organizations that I found out there was the NTOA, or the National Tactical Officers Association.
Yeah.
And the NTOA is wonderful organization where you have the cream of the crop of instructors out there, and they have the ability to maybe provide training to smaller departments that don't have the resources or the capabilities or the instructor base that the NTOA can provide. I was asked to be on their less lethal cadre, which I am currently to this day. I'm still one of their main less lethal instructors. So last year, I think I did 10 classes. It's just been insane, like the amount of less lethal classes that we've done. So as far as impact munitions, your 40 millimeters, your 12 gauge beanbags, all those types of impact munitions, we are instructors on, and also an instructor in chemical agent and flashbang.
You're traveling all over the country to do this.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. With the NTOA. And it's been a wonderful experience. And really, I honestly learned probably as much from the individuals in my class as I do teaching the class. So it keeps me plugged into the tactical side.
Yeah.
And especially being retired, you kind of want to be part of that kind of stuff and be plugged into that world. So I'm very passionate about less lethal. I'm very passionate about saving officers' lives. When Eric got murdered at USB Cannon, that really hit home in 2013 that I needed to provide quality training to my officers, where if I could save one life or do things better, where one person made a difference, and then I was successful as a leader and I was successful as an instructor. And I really preach on that a lot. So back to my career path, I decided I wanted to be promoted to a special agent. And so 2020, I put in for our internal affairs division as a special agent, and I went to Washington, D.C. and worked down there. During that time frame, I was also a task force officer with the FBI office, and I got to be able to do a lot of stuff with the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office, and learned a lot from being able to work with those individuals, do those things, and the relationships that I made. I'm still best friends with. Our families go on vacation to this day.
Is this through the internal affairs side?
It's through the FBI.
Oh, okay, but you were working as IA at the time?
Soon after that, yes, at the same time.
Okay.
And so in internal affairs, I did 3 years there, and then I decided I'd seen enough of Washington D.C. and
okay.
the corruption, and so January, I guess it was 2024, I retired from the bureau, and kind of transitioned more to being a consultant and doing more training with the NTOA, and bring corrections and public order and all those types of things. I really like the training aspect of it. So that's kind of my career path in a nutshell, but a lot of experiences through those years. I got to interview a lot of famous characters, I guess, through the years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's been wild.
One thing I do want to kind of go back to, and if you're good with talking about, but the officer who was killed in the line of duty, when you were in charge there, and I don't know if there's any inquiries or anything like that still going on, but was that something that resulted because of a lack of training, or was there like gaps identified? Because you were saying how this is something that that hit home, and then you started looking at like, we need better training. So what was missing there, and what was, I guess, ultimately determined to be the cause of this person's death?
Yeah, so Eric was killed in February of 2013. He was stabbed over 200 times by an inmate.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was horrendous, actually.
Yeah.
Eric's mom and dad have been advocates for the Federal Bureau and especially for officer safety after Eric's homicide. And so some of the things that were identified as possible issues was there was only one officer per unit, and one unit could have between 110 to 120 inmates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, crazy, right? So one officer in charge of that many inmates. And so communication's a huge, huge thing. If you don't know how to communicate, it could be a problem for you. So I do believe corrections have really, 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 really good communication skills.
Mm-hmm.
Majority. There are some bad eggs like everywhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Eric was alone. At the time, the only weapons that we had was really a radio and a set of keys. That's really all he had. He had no pepper spray. He had no stab vest or anything like that. The case is over and everything's done. So some of the things that were identified was kind of paying attention to your surroundings, understanding who's in your unit. And Eric was just picked randomly. It wasn't like he had anything, a beef with that inmate, or that inmate had a beef with him.
Okay.
It was just the wrong place at the wrong time. And unfortunately, Eric paid the price.
Yeah.
So it's still a little difficult to this day to talk about. It was rough. But what Eric's mom and dad did was an advocate, and now all the correctional officers in the bureau have pepper spray. That's a wonderful tool to have. Pepper spray is a great thing, and plus stab vests. A little bit of protection for the officers. And so I wanted to make sure that I needed to make sure that officers understood how pepper spray worked. I need to make sure that the officers understood that any given day could be the day.
Yeah.
Just like SWAT officers, police officers on the street. You can't take every day like, oh, it's just another run of the mill day. You just need to understand, and pepper spray and tools like that don't replace good tactics, and don't replace being aware of your surroundings.
Well, as much as you said like what it does or how it works, there's also how it doesn't work, and all the scenarios it doesn't work in.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, 100%, right? So if you count on that less lethal to work 100% of the time, that one time and those two riots that I had, the first one, one of the less lethal munitions that I used worked like a champion.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a sting ball grenade.
Okay.
And so if your audience isn't familiar with a sting ball grenade, it looks like a big baseball, and inside of there are 60 caliber rubber pellets. And what happens is a fuse separates from the body, the canister bursts open, and then those pellets kind of go out, and it feels like you've been kind of stung by bees a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what it's designed to do. That first incident that I had, I used one of those sting balls we threw in that area, and immediately all the inmates got down on the ground. The second riot that I had a couple years later, we ended up throwing 8 sting balls in that same area, same indoor gym, and did not have the same effect.
Yeah.
It was the same mission, but totally different effect. And one thing that I learned from that is the mindset of the individuals that you're facing. In that first situation, that group of inmates were it was a gang, 2 gangs, and they were really fighting with each other. And so their focus was on each other. So when we go in there, I do believe they were looking for an excuse to stop. It's kind of like when I always say this, when you go to a bar, right? To a bar fight. As soon as you arrive on scene, you know this. What happens, right? Somebody sucker punches somebody else right in front of you.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? Because they know you're going to jump in and save them, right?
Yeah.
They know they're right. Always.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that mindset that first riot had. That second riot that I had, they were mad at us because we were doing some mass shakedowns and searching their housing units, and they really didn't like that. And so at the time, I didn't know that. But looking back, understanding that they were mad at us, or their focus was at us as staff and not each other, that same less lethal tool didn't have the same effect. And so that was an important lesson.
Yeah, well, even on that, if you're out on the street, I imagine even in jail, they still find a way to get drugs or make drugs. But you get somebody, you add in mental health, you add in drugs and alcohol and motivation, the mindset. Yeah, people don't feel pain. They just walk through it.
They sure do, right? Isn't that funny? Like the mind is so much more powerful than the body,
Yeah.
And especially if they're on drugs or mentally disturbed. And mental illness is a big problem that I think we face all around. And so those two things combined, um, you're that less lethal tool, man. It might not have the same effect.
Yeah.
And so you better have a contingency plan. What if, what if
Yeah.
this doesn't work? What's my backup? What am I going to do?
That's what a lot of people miss is the follow-up.
Eh,
You can't, it's
Absolutely.
not just one thing and then I'm done. It's, I need to have step 2, 3, 4, 5 all kind of next up on deck and ready to go, and always be thinking what if or what's happening next. So
Yeah, that's a valid point. 100%. Have a contingency plan, because the time that these things don't work is the time that you don't have a contingency plan.
yeah.
So it's a big thing, and we also preach, especially for on the street, and it's important. It's important to point out is if you're going to use a less lethal tool, whether it be chemical agent, an impact munition, whatever it is make sure you have lethal backup.
Mhm.
Right? You want to make sure that you have lethal backup there as well, because what will happen is a lot of officers will have a new taser and they'll be out there by themselves. And what happens if that situation turns lethal and you don't have the ability to transition fast enough? You're really you're trying to use a tool so much that you violate a tactical principle.
Yeah.
And so gotta watch that.
I would 100% agree. I think a lot of, so in my experience, and now I'm a sergeant. I'm back on the street in patrol. So I've got a crew of 8 people, but I also oversee the street for a certain section of time of the day where I'm in charge of several squads in like a whole district. And, you go to these things where use of force occurs. And when you see a lot of these situations from not being in it, but just from like looking outside and then bringing your own experience in, I would say more often than not, people are they're doing what you're saying, where they're violating these tactical principles. And I think a lot of things that play into that is, all the political stuff that goes on, all the media, all these different things cause people to kind of go much lower in the use of force continuum where they should be. And, and if they're going to do that, they're not doing it with that lethal cover, or if it could be less than lethal cover, but it's just people are making questionable decisions where they're putting themselves at greater risk, because they're second guessing a lot of things where, where am I going to get the support if this goes sideways, or what's going to happen? What's this going to look like? Because I've seen this in the news. It's not one and done. It's like a 5-year process when the media is involved and professional standards or IA, and then there's like all these subsequent investigations and inquiries. So yeah, people or officers, all of law enforcement, they're putting themselves in situations they don't need to.
Yeah, and that's why, as an instructor, I really, really am passionate about training. I'm really passionate about giving the officers the tools to make good decisions. And one of the quotes that one of the guys that we used to teach with says is, you don't rise. I say this all the time. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of training.
Mm-hmm.
And and if I'm an instructor, I'm a team leader, and I want to smoke and joke with my guys when I have training time, and we're not taking advantage of that training hours or the stuff that we can do, then I'm doing a disservice to my people and my guys and gals on my team. I am not giving them the tools to be successful, to be safe, to make good decisions. And it falls back to that OODA loop, talk.
Yeah.
If a lot of people don't understand what OODA loop is, but that's really kind of how our mind works.
Yeah.
We observe, orient, decide, and act. And the orientation phase is the most important part of that whole thing. And that's based on your training and your experiences. Those are going to be those pathways that your mind has that when the time comes, you're going to be able to make better decisions. One of the things I like to talk about is when you were a rookie officer and you get your first call, right? Your first week on the job, and you're in the car and they call you and say, hey, you need to go to point A in your city. Maybe you've never been there before. How difficult is it to go there?
Yeah.
It's pretty hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Because maybe I know the 2 main streets, but without, and you can't use GPS. So some of us old guys never had GPS when we first started, right? You had to use the old road maps and do that type of stuff. So GPS wasn't an issue back then. But it's really difficult, especially when you're first starting, to be able to go from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 5 years or your career now, how easy is it when you get a call to go to any part in your jurisdiction or your city?
Yeah.
Pretty simple, isn't it? You know all the back roads, you know all the side roads, you know all the shortcuts. And that's that orientation phase. That didn't happen overnight. That happened through years of training, years of experience. And that's what it boils down to when you start making decisions under stressful situations. That training, those hours, all that stuff helps you get from point A to point B faster.
Yeah.
And if you can do that efficiently and safer, then you're going to be a better officer. And you cannot let your emotions make your decisions for you. That's what we'll see in public order.
Yeah. Well, and even in that, I mean, it's not even just your safety, it's your squad mates, and then it's the public.
Yeah.
Because if you're making bad decisions, you're putting everybody at risk. And
absolutely,
one of the things that I think sometimes people forget is like every call you go to is a gun call because you have a gun on you. So if you're getting disarmed or someone's getting too close to you, like you're bringing all these tools into the middle of it, and that's just another consideration that people do have to have. So we're talking about training. I like where this is going. I wanted to ask you because obviously with the NTOA, you have exposure across the country to all the different types of services. Down in the US, you have roughly 18,000 law enforcement agencies down there. If people haven't seen a few of just a couple. If people haven't seen some of the other podcasts I've done on this, like I had one guest on here and he did a whole study on this, like the fragmentation of services in the US. Whereas up here, we have roughly 180 across the country. So the scope of training varies far greater in the US because you have very small agencies that might not be able to afford training, or maybe they just, if it's a really tiny place, they're not going to have a riot team. They might call someone from another jurisdiction. So I'm wondering for you, when you're doing your travels, like what do you see in that variation and where do you develop your standards from? So as the NTOA, what are you putting out there and saying, this is the standard and we're all going to follow this? Like, where do you get that from?
So that's a great question. And it's a really valid point. Is there's so many agencies and so many different policies, right? Every agency, every department's going to have a separate policy for a way that they do something. And so when you go and teach an NTOA class, it's I just did one a couple months ago, I guess it was, down in Georgia, and we had people from Canada. We had I've taught people from Dubai.
Wow.
I've taught people from Australia that have come, Brazil, so all over the world come to these classes. But to your point, we get them from all over the country. And when you teach individuals from Florida or you teach individuals from Texas, it's a lot different than teaching people from Washington State or from Oregon or from New York, right? So we can't do the same things that I can do maybe in Texas. I can't do that in Oregon. And so as far as the NTOA goes, we try to do a best practice. And so the supreme law of the land is our federal law and our amendment process. And so we teach based on federal law. And we like to really stress that we are showing them a way of doing business. It's not the way or the only way to do business. And that boils down to the training that we've kind of established is based on good law, policy, and ethics.
Okay.
And it has to be defendable. We have to be able to repeat it. And we have to be able to show that that it's the right way to do things. So it's a way of doing business. So when I show a tactic with a less lethal munition or a less lethal tool or a chemical agent, that might not fly in Washington State. So what they would have to do is look at what I've taught as an NTOA instructor and tailor that specifically to what their state law says, and what their specific policy says. And we always say, I'm showing you a way of doing business, but when you go back to your department or your agency, you need to tailor this training to the way of doing business for your guys and gals on your department.
Yeah.
And so they can't just show, hey, this is really cool, and they can do this in Texas. We can't do this here, but they still show that, and that's not the way to do things. You need to tailor that training specifically to your laws. Now, in the United States, and I'm sure Canada is probably somewhat similar, if there's an excessive use of force charge, like if an officer gets charged with excessive use of force, even if they just do some type of use of force, they're going to get charged in federal court, right? So it's going to go in front of a federal judge. Federal judges aren't going to care what California law says. They're going to fall back on what the Fourth Amendment in the United States says, and it falls back to unlawful searches and seizures.
Okay.
And when we use force on an individual, that's considered a seizure. So that's kind of how it boils down to and how it looks. So we like to show a way of doing business based on law, policy, and ethics. And then when you go back to your jurisdiction or your country per se, you
got to tailor it. Yeah.
Oh, you got to tailor it. They have no idea what the First Amendment is.
Yeah.
Or the Fourth Amendment, right? So when we teach that stuff, it doesn't mean anything. But they have stuff similar. Same way in Canada, our laws are pretty close.
Yeah.
It's just things a little different. That's all. So you have to tailor it specifically to what that law says.
Even when it comes to the public order stuff, actually, even before I even mention public order, I'll say, the way you're describing it, it makes me think of our crim flight policy. So like our car chases. And, one service here can throw stop sticks and spike belts in this scenario. And then you literally cross an imaginary line and the next person's like, we don't do any of that unless you're tactical or something. It's just like, why? But it's just you cross this little boundary and all of a sudden these people do things like they're on another planet.
Yeah, it's it. Same way here. Yeah. Exactly the same way here. Some people have no chase laws. Some individuals, you can't even use a chemical agent without getting the highest elected official's approval prior to deployment.
Wow.
That's highest elected official probably isn't a law enforcement individual. It's probably going to be your mayor or your governor of whatever jurisdiction you're in. And that's wild to me. That officers on scene have to, hey, let me call up the mayor and see if I can use this chemical agent.
Yeah.
So there are places and pockets in the United States that are very similar to that.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's wild, isn't it?
But even up here, we're trying to get more of a consistent standard right across the country when it comes to dealing with the public disorder type issues. I know within our province, Alberta. So we started doing more integrated training with the RCMP, with Calgary Police is the other large service up here. So we try to get consistency across not just the tactics, but even the terminology and how you might describe this stuff in court. It leads to better outcomes when we can say like, hey, we operate very similarly because we do have to go and help out in a lot of situations with, whether we just had the G7 up here. So you had multiple agencies working on that and you can't have them all on a different page. And this guy in the line can use force in this way, but this guy next to him can't use force. Like we have to have some consistency and then be able to articulate it properly.
Yeah. It's very, very, very similar here. Same thing.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of, I had a couple of commanders on here recently that were a part of our public safety unit, which is, for lack of a better term, we'll say riot team, but it's that's the way people mostly describe it. But it's called the public safety unit. And one thing they were bringing up that we don't seem to mention out there a lot, and I don't think the media really puts it out there because they just want to put out the sensationalized pieces, but the actual purpose of police when they show up to these things, these giant protests and the disorder and everything that's going on. What do you explain, I guess through the NTOA even, what do you start with when you say, like, here's the reason we're here and our purpose? Like, what's the intention of police being present in those scenarios?
So the NTOA definitely sees there was a gap in training in public order. And our section chair for public order is a gentleman by the name of Spencer Thomby. And Spencer's a top-notch trainer. Spencer's a wonderful, wonderful resource. So he's in charge of that section. And so we helped him with the less lethal side of the house and coming up with, using chemical agents, using those types of tools in public order. So what we like to tell them is, when you're in a public order, what in America's, we have the First Amendment, and that guarantees our citizens the right to grieve their government, protest, I can say no matter how moronic some of the things that come out of people's mouths are, you still have the right to say that.
Yeah.
Now there are situations where obviously you can't, they always use the term, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater because that puts other individuals at harm. And that's why they do that. But other than that, I mean, you can pretty much say what you want to say.
Yeah.
And do those things. So protesting is it's very important to be able to do that to your government. Now, depending on the jurisdiction, they can put maybe time, manner, and how many people can go there. They can make you get permits, those type of things. So as far as policing showing up on scene, we're not only there to protect your right as an individual to protest, which is very important, right? We're there to protect that right for you, but we're there to also protect the right of the citizen that's not there for the protest. That doesn't mean that those protesters can block highways and they can block thoroughfares that interfere with my day-to-day business going from point A to point B. And so we have to balance that in between. And law enforcement has a tough job doing that sometimes. And but that's truly why we're there, is to protect both sides of the citizens.
Yeah.
Police, we're there to save lives and we're there to protect rights.
It's funny when you talk about that too, because and very good points. And that doesn't get said enough, is like, yeah, I'm there so that, you can safely exercise your right. But I'm also there to make sure the other side of it, or people not involved who just want to walk through this space, that they can do that too. And yeah, police are in a tough spot because, I've been at ones where just because of which direction you might be facing, like you might just be looking at this group because they're all standing so much closer to you, they'll accuse you of taking the other team's side. And you're just like, I'm only looking in your direction because you're standing 2 feet from me. Like, how would you just back up? But, it comes down to that type of stuff where people accuse you of picking a side.
Yeah, it makes it tough. It makes it really, really tough. And then you have, your professional agitators. We mentioned that a little bit in the beginning when we were talking offline. But there's individuals out there that are paid to be agitators. And there's also individuals out there that want to challenge that First Amendment right. One of the FBI, the individual that's in charge of the FBI office that I worked out of, he actually goes around and does a wonderful class on identifying people that want to challenge police on their knowledge of First Amendment or those types of things. You'll see people go around with cameras and get into police officers' faces and just heckle and just harass to the point where they want you to make a mistake. Yeah. They want you to make an emotional decision, and then they got you, and then they own you. So that's why I really stress you can't be emotional in these situations.
Yeah,
you have to not let your emotions dictate your actions. And honestly, public order, this is probably one of the toughest ones because, man, I've been there where they get right in front of your face and they call you all kinds of names and want to get a reaction out of you. You just can't let them do that.
My experience too, I'll give them a little bit of credit. There's some pretty funny people that come up to the line and say stuff.
That is true.
And you're like,
that is true.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, or that is pretty funny. But in this situation, I don't get to laugh or say, give you a high five or something.
Well, you just gave me PTSD going back to my military days. We had some drill sergeants, drill instructors. Man, they were hilarious. Some of the stuff that they would come up with and yell at you and say to you, and heaven forbid you laugh, man, or do any of those things because you'd be doing push-ups till your arms fall off or
I wanted to ask you about some of the tactics that are involved. So obviously you work in the less lethal space, but when you're teaching these classes, is it generally a kind of a gradual progression that you would work through outside of like real exigent stuff? But, is that the general theme of what you end up doing? It's like, we're going to move a crowd, then maybe we have to push them with batons, and then we have to go to less lethal if they start pushing back or something. Like it's a progression.
So there's, we do talk about that a little bit. Obviously, I don't want to go, from 0 to 100 right off the bat. And how we classify protests really is an important kind of point to make.
Okay.
It's everybody has a right to protest, right? And once that protest becomes unlawful, and you'll hear that announcement, this is now an unlawful protest. The reason we say that is because now that gives us an ability to maybe impact them sooner than later with some type of force. And when I say impact, it could be a less lethal, it could be a chemical agent, because that is a use of force. It could be, pushing back with bikes or bringing in horses.
Yeah.
Type of thing. So any of that is a use of force, and how we classify that public order or that public disorder kind of happening is a big deal. Once it turns into a riot, when we classify something as a riot, that's a criminal action.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to be able to use force on somebody doing a criminal action, I can use force sooner than later in those types of situations. So we have to understand what type of gathering we have. If it's and you heard this so much on the news, back in 2020, is a mostly peaceful protest.
Yeah, I was just thinking this as you're saying it.
Absolutely. So you hear that all the time. So let's talk about that. So if I have a mostly peaceful protest and I have one or two agitators in that crowd that maybe are throwing rocks at me, that's a criminal action. They're committing assault. The rest of those individuals in there are peacefully protesting. So when we teach using tools and you talk about a progression, if I threw a chemical agent in there, whether it be OC or CS, any type of chemical agent, it's indiscriminate.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't know the peaceful protesters from the ones that may be committing the criminal acts. It doesn't know the good guys from the bad guys or the public from the people doing that. So it's an indiscriminate use of force. So therefore, I could be violating individuals' rights to even be there.
Mm-hmm.
So we really teach, do not use multi-projectiles, sting balls, those things that we talked about before. Anything that's a multiple projectile, because I can't control that as an operator where those rounds impact people.
Yeah.
Now, if I have a riot, that's a different situation. I can go ahead and use a chemical agent because anybody that's out there on that street is committing a criminal act, right? We've already determined that's what it is. As far as a progression, there's court cases in the United States where it pretty much says that I don't have to do A before I do B before I do C.
Yeah.
That's really truly up to the individual officer to determine what would work best.
So you're still afforded some discretion in there.
Yes, absolutely. And depending on your jurisdiction where you're at, they may not allow, CS gas. They may not allow impact munitions. Depending on in the country, that tool might be taken right out of what you're able to do.
Mm-hmm.
We recommend definitely the least amount, right, necessary, or the least amount of force necessary. And there's tools. That's why I talk about having contingencies if one of those doesn't work. When we talk about pepper balls or high pressure air systems, 68 caliber paintball type munition or systems, most of those hit between 10 and 12 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. That's really low on the kinetic energy scale when we're talking about that.
Yeah.
When we look at bead bags out of a 12 gauge shotgun or even a 40 millimeter bead bag, you're talking between 110 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. Some of them, up to 160 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. So that's a really big leap in that progression of amount of force. And so I would always recommend that you try verbally, those verbal skills first and foremost. And then if you have to, maybe go to maybe a pepper ball type system. If that doesn't work, maybe amp it up to the next. But that doesn't mean I have to.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I have to.
I was just thinking how, so we deploy with R-Winds on the street and, we'll use the BIP rounds. And like, there's guys like, if again, back to what we were saying at the beginning, that are motivated, they get a little bit high. You could use like 4 or 5 rounds on them and they're still coming at you full on fighting. And you're like, it has all that energy and stuff, but it really, again, if you're in a riot, I've seen people, they're in a riot, they don't feel anything just because they're so amped up on adrenaline. And
true believers, 100%. The true believers that are there because they really are the true believers, not maybe a paid protester, but the true believers, you're 100% right, man. And those BIP rounds, I wish we could still get them in the States. We can't get them anymore.
Oh, really?
The manufacturing, yeah. They those are awesome, man. 150 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, and that collapsible head on those is that's a wonderful tool for officers.
I think the ones we get, I think they're manufactured in Quebec, in Montreal, maybe. Yeah,
That's the issue is being able to ship those,
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Now,
Interesting.
Arwen is setting up a factory in the United States here. I was just talking to the people over at Arwen, and they're going into the 40 millimeter line.
Yeah.
And they're awesome. We have Sage ordnance here, which is based pretty much like an Arwen, 37 millimeter rifle stuff. And those things are great, man.
Yeah.
Great tool.
Interesting on the use of force stuff. One thing I think would be interesting to ask you about is obviously with you have the firearm rights down there. We don't have that up here. It's a very different scenario. Like if we're in front of a crowd and we see somebody with a gun, that is like, yeah, everybody's directing their attention to that and everybody's going to that person. But in the US, I mean, you can have people that have open carry. So how do you train people for that or prepare them for that? That seems like it'd be almost impossible to prepare for.
Yeah, it's really hard because you still have constitutional rights, open carry, right? Now, as officers, we're behind the eight ball, and unfortunately, we become more reactive lots of those times than proactive. I would say that I would recommend as a commander to those protests if you start seeing weapons that maybe we need to make sure that we start classifying this protest something else sooner than later. That's the kind of stuff I would look at. But you're 100% right. I don't know how you can't train for everything, and you can't just have a contingency for everything that could happen out there. But very, very, very much more dangerous in the United States because of everybody having firearms.
Yeah,
and I have tons of firearms, and actually I lost all mine.
Like, no, I don't. I don't have any.
I'm just
this one behind me right now. That's not a real one.
But I am so for upholding people's rights.
Yeah,
and giving you the ability to exercise those rights. Now, when those rights start violating other people's rights, then as law enforcement, we need to take action. It's tough though, right?
Yeah, like one of the biggest ones I've been to was when we had Ottawa, so our nation's capital, kind of got taken over when it was all the convoy protests, all the truckers around COVID. And when we get there, and you're standing in front of a group of thousands of people, it's impossible to watch all their hands. And up here, like it was, when did we go there? February? It was cold. I remember it was still super cold. So everybody's got like big puffy jackets on, multiple layers. Like you can't see waistbands, you can't see their hands, and people just moving in and amongst the crowd. So like you'll see someone for a second, and then 10 bodies shift. And I was just thinking, I'm like, man, if somebody had a firearm in here or came up to the front of the line and presented that firearm, would you even shoot as a police officer? Because you have a moving target in front of 1,000 people, and you miss, you're the one getting in trouble. So it's like you're almost going to just have to take the round, and that's it. But now you get a crowd of like where people are allowed to carry. How the hell would you deal with that?
Well, luckily we have our court case that kind of gives the officers the benchmark was Graham versus Connor. And it's a 3-pronged test that we use in the United States is honestly what's the severity of the crime, and if somebody presents that firearm in a crowd in front of officers, we say a gun in hand is a gun in use sometimes, right? They're not putting it out there to show me, hey, look at this wonderful firearm I have. It's usually for ill intention. A gun in hand is a gun in use. So there's a difference between having it on my hip, open carry, and then me drawing that weapon out in that type of situation. So we kind of look at that way. But we have what's the severity of the crime? What's the threat to the officer or individuals around? And then is the individual trying to evade escape or evade arrest, right? So that's the 3-pronged test our court system is going to look at when an officer uses force. And so when you look at that deadly force, what was the officer's intentions? And we really, and you see this a lot on TV, especially now, actually. I mean, you're seeing it now. If you turn on the news, you'll see what's happening up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
You really see people kind of second guessing or having hindsight 2020 of what the officer is going on. We have to make, and as well as I do, you got to make split-second decisions that are rapid, they're tense, and they evolve really, really fast. And so you got to make good decisions based, hopefully, on good training that you've had and understanding of the law that me looking back at it 2 days later, I can say, oh man, I wouldn't have done that. Well, I don't know that because I'm not in that situation. And therefore, you shouldn't be judged hindsight 2020. And luckily, we have that court case that really kind of helps the officers navigate that stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers, but we are behind the eight ball, on stuff. We are reactive a lot.
Yeah. And as much as it is, and this is something that we can control, but as much as it is on law enforcement to make sure we're doing things properly, I think a big component that's missing, and I say this to some of the higher ups, I go, putting out the education and also the groups that show up, the ones that are there to peacefully protest or exercise their rights, to put it on them and say, if you don't want to be classified as, this terrorist or whatever group, or you're there with some ill intent and we're going to start dealing with you in such a way, it's like, then you start calling out the people in the crowd and tell us and we'll come deal with them, or, point them out ahead of time, or have some means of communication to do this. Because, at the end of the day, it's like, if we get multiple people in the group acting up, it's like, we're just telling everybody to get out of there. Like, you all have to leave. So, it makes it, we have to put some of it back on the community and the groups that show up and say, like, you have to help out. We can't do everything from our side where we are. But I find sometimes, I think maybe, chiefs of police and politicians are afraid to do that.
100% agree with you, right? And unfortunately, we see that here as well in the States. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. Communication is vital, not only with the public, but we need to communicate with our administrators and our legal people in our departments.
Yeah,
we need to have those conversations prior to an incident. That's good leadership. Is what am I doing prior to a riot in my jurisdiction? Am I out there? Have I already established the protocols with my chief and my legal department, my city manager?
Mm-hmm.
Are we understanding what we can do and can't do? What I'm going to do as a SWAT leader? How am I going to go out there and do those things? That conversation needs to happen prior to that incident.
Yeah.
Then once that incident is happening, hopefully they understand what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So we need to teach them just as much as we need to teach the public.
Well, and that falls into, I don't want to, I'm in the middle of the riot. I don't think I should have to call the mayor. He shouldn't have an idea of like what we do or are capable of doing, and in certain situations, like provide that education. So,
right. And all your officers should understand how we're going to handle this and what we're going to do. It shouldn't be a surprise on the chemical munitions we might use. It shouldn't be a surprise of a progression or what I might do as that commander. That's where it boils down to that training.
Yeah.
And that's where it boils down to pre-planning contingencies, doing those things prior to.
Yeah. That's
vital, man.
Two things I want to get in here before the end of our time. We have roughly 10 minutes left. The intelligence side of it. We were talking about this just before we started recording, but I really like getting into this because I don't think the general public realizes just how many professional agitators show up at these events. And we get this up here in Canada. We start to see small groups move around, and familiar faces will show up from city to city, but I don't personally know of like anybody who's gone, across the country to do something. I don't doubt there are those people, but I think it's more prevalent in the US right now where you get a lot of this happening. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with the professional, the paid protesters, and like what is actually going on with these people behind the scenes?
Yeah, there's very few true believers. When you start looking at these protests or these riots, you will have these paid protesters that go around the country. In my experience, I was in the Department of Justice Command Center down in Washington D.C. in the summer of I guess it was 2020, right? The summer of love, we call it, right? And my team, I actually did deployed up to Brooklyn, New York, as well when they had things going on there. And as a team leader, assistant team leader, I had the ability to sit in the command center and kind of observe everything that was going on. And some of the young intel officers, a lot younger than me, they're very savvy with TikTok and all those social media platforms. My mind was blown when they actually showed me and said, "Hey, Bob, take a look at take a look at how they're communicating. And they were showing me in real time from some of these websites and some of these forums. Hey, we're going to meet here. Hey, this is where you pick up this sign or these bricks or this pot and pan that you can bang and those types of things. There was a coordinated effort in real time using social media, different avenues, and I would have no idea myself personally where to look. But it's important as police officers that we have people that know where to look in the intel side, and you can see that stuff happening in real time. It is a business. There are some nefarious individuals that pay a lot of money, and we don't need to mention who they are. We probably know who they are. That pay protesters to go out there, and they pay them quite well, $20 an hour, and they sign up in shifts. I actually saw them signing up in shifts of I will be at point A this time. Anybody else going to be there? And they would sign up. That's how they would do it. It was mind blowing to me that there are the individuals out there that look at this as a job and want to make our lives miserable in the process as law enforcement. I'm all about being able to exercise your right to protest, but man, we need to do better. We need to do better as countries and as individuals and as a person. We need to do better, man. Why not make the world a better place?
Well, and I think this goes back to what we were saying earlier about community helping out, and when people say law enforcement in general is expensive. I mean, it's always I don't think I've ever seen a city not complain about how much law enforcement costs, and it's usually the biggest or one of the biggest line items in their budget. So it's like, well, if you don't want us out there, for hours upon hours a day dealing with all this stuff, like, then start helping out. But again, goes back on the community or these special interest groups. Like, you can go out and say what you want to say, but when you start getting people there that shouldn't be there, that aren't part of your group or looking to agitate, like, then start working with the police or the intelligence agencies and be like, those guys over there, they're not part of us. We want nothing to do with them. If you can identify them a certain way or you look different than, whatever they're dressed in or something, it's like the whole, everybody has a part to play in this and make the whole thing better. So
and honestly, our politicians got to do better on all sides. They got to do better.
Yeah,
they're you see it now down here in the United States with our ICE, right?
Yeah,
we're law enforcement. We're not making the laws. We're not the politicians creating laws. We are enforcing the laws that they created.
Yeah. And
then when they go out there and do it, you get beat up by the public, you get beat up by the politicians, the one that actually created the laws.
Yeah.
And so I put a lot of blame on them.
Yep.
Honestly. They need to do better.
Yeah. It's that, the laws, and then they've got usually the biggest microphone, right? I mean, if they want to say something, the media is going to put them on. So start saying better things. Just as we're coming up to the end of the time, I wanted to talk about your current venture that you're a part of. So you're with SoRite, and you got some pretty interesting products. Yeah, just in December you came out with Defense Cleanse. Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about this and like what you're doing with it?
Yeah, so SoRite is a company based out of Nashville, and Autumn will get into that. As you have her on as your next guest, but in Nashville, Tennessee. And I happened to be in the NTOA National Conference here this past year in Washington, D.C., and walking around the vendor booths and kind of taking note of the different products out there. And SoRite had a booth there. And this product caught my eye because I'm in the less lethal world and we're always dealing with chemical agent. And there's been so many different companies out there that come out with a product that says that you use our product and it takes the effects of that OC so much faster. I've tried them all. They don't work. It's always boiled down to baby shampoo, and Johnson's baby shampoo is what we've used to try to lessen. Okay. And it still takes me about 25 to 30 minutes to recover after getting sprayed with OC or being in that CS environment. It's not fun, right? It's not fun. So baby shampoo has kind of been my go-to. Well, I'm walking around the national conference and I see a booth there called SoRite, and I see a little bottle called Defense Cleanse. I said, okay, is this another one of those products that doesn't work? So I started putting it to the test. And I'm not kidding. This is the only product that in 3 minutes after an individual gets sprayed in the eyes, you can open your eyes and you can function in 3 to 4 minutes average. That's what we've been getting. And I was just out in Nashville a couple of days ago, and one of the individuals out there got sprayed. We did a demo. 3 minutes, his eyes were open. In 2 hours, you would never have known he was sprayed. Because we went out to dinner 2 hours later. I'm like, dude, I would never know that you just got sprayed with pepper spray. Usually your eyes would be puffy and have some after.
I can't do. I've been OC sprayed a couple times. I've been in CS gas a couple times, and CS I don't find too bad, but OC spray, like, no, never again. I don't want to carry it.
It's horrendous, right?
Yeah.
It's horrendous. But man, this product works. And so this is the one that I said, well, I need to be a part of this. I need to educate not only for the officers in the academy, right, to lessen those effects, but if I spray somebody, I could get that secondary exposure on me. Mm-hmm. Now, how am I going to decon myself in the field, especially if I have to maybe fight another individual as an officer, right? When you're in a fist fight, in a bar fight, and one of the officers breaks out a can of OC, they get everybody. It's another indiscriminate use of force. So if I have some of this defense cleanse wipes with me, man, it puts me in the fight faster. But it's not only for that, it's also for the general public. It's so much easier to deal with a protester after I've used OC on them if they're not suffering for 20, 25 minutes working through those effects of the OC. If I can lessen that effect, they're going to communicate with me a lot easier. They're going to listen to my commands a lot better.
Yeah.
And not only also in the jails, they use chemical agents in the jail settings and prisons daily, all the time. And so Defense Cleanse is a product that I see as a section chair for corrections and as a less lethal instructor, really fitting that category. They also have a couple other products Autumn will talk about, but they have one called Decon, and it oxidizes fentanyl in 60 seconds. Yeah. So that was the one that really caught my eye because of an officer that died last year at USP Atwater, another federal prison, worked in the mailroom and got exposed to fentanyl through the mailroom and ended up dying because of that. And so that was a line of duty death. And I never knew a product like this existed. And I'll let Autumn go into detail about that, but that is truly what brought me to SoRite are those two main products. And I saw applications for those products in what I am passionate about, saving officers' lives. And not only that, but good public policy or good public policing is how can I limit this? How can I limit the public's exposure to a chemical agent when I just did it in public order? Mm-hmm. I had Defense Cleanse. I can show that I'm doing good faith, right? I don't want to have the public suffer a chemical agent. And
just one extra step. Yeah.
Makes our job a heck of a lot easier to deal with somebody after they've been deconned than if those, their eyes are shut. They're not paying attention to commands.
Yeah.
It's a lot of other stuff. So that's kind of what brought me to SoRite and why I'm passionate about what they're doing over there. And I'll let Autumn go into more detail about all that stuff. But they have something special that that I haven't seen. I haven't seen any other company come out with anything that even compares.
Well, very cool. I'm looking forward to it. I chat with her here shortly, so in about an hour or so. No, hey, you know what? We're just at the end of the time. Is there anywhere that people can find you if they want to connect? Where's the best places? Website, social media? Where would you like them to reach out?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. They can go ahead and search me on LinkedIn. Send me a message through there. I'm all about helping. And actually, I've had officers call me. I've been out at dinner at 5:00 and they took one of my less lethal classes and they were actually on a call out and, hey, Bob, is this the right munition to use in this situation? What do you think? Can we use this here? I'm like,
wow.
Yeah, go ahead. And then, okay, I'll let you know how it turns out. So, I mean, that's actually happened in the past. So feel free, man. If I can help officers, if I can help the public, if I can help anybody to do things better, if we know better, we got to do better. And I'm a true advocate for that, man. And we just got to do it better.
Awesome.
So reach out to me. LinkedIn's probably the easiest thing. If you go to SoRite.com, you can also find me under there as well and send me a message. I'd be more than to help you, get you some sample of the stuff and test it out, try it out. And I'm a firm believer of that. You need to test a product out for yourself as an officer to really believe in what it does. Don't take other people's word for it, especially when you're in the whole less lethal world. You're going to have a lot of people try to sell you stuff. Do your due diligence, test the products out, and make your own opinion.
Oh, very good. Hey, I really appreciate being on here today. So thank you for coming on and educating us. And I look forward to seeing what you guys do in the future.
Absolutely. If I can be of any further assistance, man, I'm here to help.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.